Hi everyone, welcome to the Jayda and Stitches show. So recently, all of our local stores have gone plastic bag free again. And so it's time to break out those reusable, rewashable, homemade DIY market bags. And I just happened to be in Walmart today. I found two great big balls of 100% cotton yarn in pretty variegated colors. So I've got a really pretty purpley blue white one here and a purpley, pink, yellowy, green, kind of everything in the rainbow here. And both of these balls are really gigantic. They're 375 yards each. Now, I know I'm not going to need that much yarn to make a big, brand new market bag, but I thought it would be fun to mix these two crazy variegated colors together, kind of like we did with the big, beautiful basket, and see what we come up with. So today we're going to put together a new market bag for you. We're using two strands held together of some 100% cotton variegated yarn. So let's grab our yarn, our hooks, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we'll stitch up a new market bag together. For today's market bag tutorial, you're going to want around 200 yards per strand of a 100% cotton size 4 medium weight yarn. I'm going to use two completely different variegated colors, but you could use two of the same color, two solids, whatever you like. But altogether you're going to need 400 yards. That's 200 yards per ball or per strand. A pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and the hook we're using is a 6.5 millimeter or 7 millimeter, also known as a K, or a 10.5 in the US, possibly a 2 or a 3 if you've got old hooks from the UK. A large hook, but not too large. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. This entire project is made holding two strands of yarn together. Always treat the two strands held together as though they were a single strand. We're going to start by grabbing both strands and making a slip knot. And we're going to chain 24 to begin. 24 chains. Remember, you're treating both strands of yarn as a single strand. Once you have 24 chains in your foundation chain row, we're going to use the half double crochet stitch. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook, find the second one, and half double crochet 3 times into it. So remember, you want to get both of those strands treated as a single strand up over top of your hook. And we're going to make 3 half double crochet into that first, or I should say the second chain from the hook. It's the first thing we do. So 3 half double crochet into the second chain from the hook. You're going to half double crochet now into each chain all the way across just once until you get to the last chain, and I'll hook up with you there. Once you've worked a half double crochet into each of those chains, there's 21 of them, that will leave you with 1 chain left at the end, and we're going to work 3 half double crochet stitches into this last chain. And those 3 half double crochet stitches are just going to try to turn us around so that we can now work back across the underside of those middle 21 half double crochets. So I'm going to work over top of my little short tail. I'm going to find the bottom, so that's the last chain right here. If you pull up on it, you can see all 3 worked into it. The next one is going to be right here. We're going to half double crochet into each of those 21 chains all the way back, and there's going to be 1 half double crochet for the underside of each of those 21 half double crochets worked across the other side. So we're working back across the bottom of our foundation chain row, and this is going to form the very bottom center of our bag. There are 21 middle stitches between ends, and once you've worked the last half double crochet into the remaining bottom chain, that brings you back to the beginning, and we are not joining our rows with a slip stitch. We are instead going to just work directly into the first stitch from row 1 to begin row 2. So if you have trouble keeping track of where rows start and stop, I recommend using a little stitch marker. So here we are back at the beginning. I'm going to work a half double crochet into the top of the first stitch of row 1. So this was the first stitch of row 1. I'm going to work directly into it. I am not joining the row with a slip stitch. I'm going to work a half double crochet into it, nice and tight. That first stitch always is. Come here, you. There we go. In fact, I'm going to work 2 because we're going to be working 2 half double crochet into each of those first 3 stitches from the previous row. Since we're working in the round, you might find marking the first stitch of each row with a stitch marker to be helpful. This is if you have trouble kind of keeping track of where you're at. So that was row 2, stitch number 1. I've marked it, and that's the first 2 stitches of row number 2 worked into what was the first stitch of row number 1. So you can see how this can get a little confusing if you're not marking that first stitch. But if you can keep track without using a stitch marker, you can do that too. So that's the first 2 stitches of row 2 are worked into what was the first stitch of row 1. We're going to work 2 half double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. And 1 half double crochet into each of the next 21 stitches. So those are the middle stitches all the way across. 1 half double crochet into each of them. That's 21 middle stitches, 1 half double crochet worked into each of them. That brings us up to the next side where we've got 1, 2, 3 stitches across the side. We're going to work 2 half double crochet into each of them. And when you're working with 2 strands held together, do try not to split up your yarns or split your yarn in general. I know sometimes it can take a little bit of getting used to, but it will start to make sense. Remember to try not to split your yarns or to drop one while you're working. But if you do drop a yarn, don't worry, it's not going to unravel. Just to pick up the next stitch if you don't want to back up and sort of pick up that yarn. Just keep going as though you didn't miss a stitch. And that's 2 half double crochet worked across the side. That leaves us with the remaining 21 middle stitches all the way across. That's 1 half double crochet for each of them. Once you've finished a half double crochet in each of those middle 21 stitches, that brings us back to the beginning again. So there's my marked stitch. That was the first stitch of row 2. And now we're going to begin row 3 in this stitch. So I'm going to remove my stitch marker temporarily. And across these next 6 stitches, we're going to work a little repeat pattern. 2 half double crochet, 1 half double crochet, 2 half double crochet, 1 half double crochet, 2 half double crochet, 1 half double crochet. So let's start with the 2 half double crochet. 1 and 2. And before I leave, I'm going to take my stitch marker, mark what is the first stitch now of row 3, and then I can forget about it and work on the rest of row 3. So 1 half double crochet into the next stitch, and then 2 into the next stitch, 1 into the next stitch, try not to split my yarn, and then 2, 1 again. That brings me up to the middle 21 stitches, and I'm going to work a single half double crochet or 1 half double crochet into each of those middle 21 stitches, and that'll bring me up to the other side. That's 21 half double crochet now across the middle section. That brings me up to the next 6 stitches, and into those 6 stitches we're going to do the same little repeat pattern. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And then a half double crochet into each of the next 21, and that brings us back to the beginning again. That's a half double crochet across each of those 21 middle stitches, and that brings us back to the beginning. This is the marked stitch of row 3, so that's the stitch we began the row in. I'm going to take it out now, and now I'm going to start row 4 in the same stitch that was marked. Row 4, we begin with the little increase pattern, 2 half double crochet in the first stitch and a half double crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, and that takes us all around the first curve. So I'm going to start with 2 half double crochet in the first stitch, and before I continue, I'm going to mark that first stitch. So that's the first stitch now of row 4, all marked so I know where I am when I come back, and a half double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So 2, 1, 1. 2 half double crochet into the next stitch, and a half double crochet into each of the next 2. And then we're going to repeat that once more. 2, 1, 1. 2 half double crochet into the next stitch, and a half double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So we're continuing that little increase that just helps keep fanning out the edge or the side of our bag. This is the bottom we're working on, so we're going to make it a little bit wider and just a little bit longer, and then off we go for the upper part, but we're going to get to that in a bit. You've got 21 middle stitches now. Work a half double crochet into each of them. 21 stitches across the middle. That brings us up to the other side, and we want to do exactly on this side what we did on the other side. So we work 2 half double crochet into the first stitch, and a half double crochet into each of the next 2. 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, and then that will leave us with 20 more, or I should say 21 more half double crochets across the middle, and that's going to finish off row 4. 2 half double crochet into the first stitch to start the corner, half double crochet into each of the next 2, repeat that twice more, and then a half double crochet into each of the remaining 21 stitches to finish off row 4. At the end of row 4, we're back where we started, and we're going to do one more row of increasing. We want this wide enough that we can put sort of a jug of milk in it if we have to. We're going to take our stitch marker out. We're going to start row 5 with 2 half double crochet in the first stitch, because we are doing one more little row of increase. So 2 half double crochet in the first stitch. I'm going to replace my stitch marker so that I know that that's the first stitch of row 5, and I'm going to finish off the rest of the little increase pattern around my hump here, around the first side. A half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. And then we're going to repeat that little pattern twice more. 2 half double crochet into the first stitch, half double crochet into each of the next 3, 2 half double crochet into the next stitch, half double crochet into each of the next 3. Then you'll have 21 half double crochet stitches across the middle, and that'll bring us up to the other side. 21 half double crochet across those middle stitches. That brings you up to your second side, and you want to work that little increase pattern once more. 2 half double crochet into the first stitch, and a half double crochet into each of the next 3. 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, and then that gives you 21 more half double crochet to do across the second side to finish off row 5. That is the end of row 5, and I love how these 2 variegated colors are looking together so far. Really exciting. I know I'm at the end of row 5 because this was the first stitch of the row, and I marked it with my stitch marker, and now we're going to work 5 rows of just straight single crochet. So no more increasing. We're just going to single crochet in each stitch all the way around, and I'm going to continue to use my little stitch marker. So I'm going to work the first 2 stitches of the row. That's a stitch in each one, just to get out of the way of my own stitch marker. That was the first stitch of the row. This is row 6, and now I'm just going to work a half double crochet into every single stitch all the way around. So we're done with the increasing part. We're going to just work up the side a little bit. Your bag will start to curl into a bit of a bowl or a bucket shape. If the first couple of rows of just straight single crochet don't have your work turning, don't worry, it's just probably because your stitching is easing up, so your tension isn't super tight. That's no big deal. It's not going to affect the outcome of the bag itself. So 5 rows of half double crochet, in every single stitch all the way around. Every time you get back to the last stitch, work your last stitch, remove your stitch marker, work the first, maybe the first 2 stitches, put your stitch marker back in so you know where the first stitch of the row is, and that will help you keep track of where you're at. And counting rows is pretty easy. You can always just pause, find the middle, so here's that foundation chain row right across the middle, and you can tell because your 2 stitches on either side are kind of facing opposite each other, and you count your rows like this: row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5. We know we just finished row 5. There's my stitch marker indicating that I've started row 6, and I'm always going to count from the middle up when I finish a row, just so I know how many complete rows I've done. So, half double crochet in each stitch around for 5 rows in total, and I'll see you in a little while. At the end of row 10, you should have something that looks a bit like a bowl, and that is the end of row 10. I know I'm at the end of the row because there's my marker that indicated the stitch that started the row. Each row has 72 stitches in it. So from row 5 onward, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we all have 72 stitches per row. And that is a multiple of 3. Very important because we're about to start our shell stitch row. Into the next stitch, which was the marked stitch, we're going to actually slip stitch to close the row. So we've worked 10 rows so far in the round using the half double crochet stitch. We're just going to slip stitch into the next stitch to kind of close off the row. And now we're going to start the double crochet shell stitch. To begin the row, we're going to chain 3, and this chain 3 counts as a double crochet. So chain 3 counts as a double crochet into the same stitch that you slip stitched into. Work 2 more double crochet stitches. So 1, 2, 3. 3 double crochet stitches together equals 1 shell. We're not chaining in between, we're just going to skip 2 stitches, find the next one, and work 3 double crochet into that 3rd stitch. So 1, 2, and 3. 3 double crochet equals 1 shell. We've got 2 shells so far in our row. If you find that keeping track of where your rows start and stop, even though we've changed stitches, you can go ahead and mark the first stitch or the top of that chain 3. That was the beginning of your shell. And then you can continue with this first row of shell stitch. Skip 2 stitches, find the next one, that's stitch number 3, work 3 double crochet all into the same stitch, and that is 1 shell. So you're going to work a shell every 3rd stitch, or 3 double crochet into every 3rd stitch all the way around, and I'll catch up with you back at the beginning. You know you've finished your row of shell stitch when you get back round to your marked stitch. You will have 2 stitches left, 1, 2. This little guy here that looks like a stitch is actually the false stitch. You get what's called a false stitch when you are working in the round and you finally join a row with a slip stitch. That creates what's an extra little stitch, or sometimes called the false stitch. We ignore it. So there's 2 stitches left. You're going to take out your stitch marker and join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 that began the row. I'm just going to ram my hook in there. Slip stitch to join, and you should have 24 shells all the way around. You'll still have 72 stitches, but it's sometimes easier to just count the little shell motif. So you should have 24 of them all the way around. And that is the first row of the shell stitch finished. Now we're going to work 11 more rows of the shell stitch. And this is an inline shell stitch, so instead of working it into the spaces, we're always going to work the next shell into the middle of the shell from the previous row. So to start every row, you finish joining the previous row with a slip stitch in the top of the chain 3, slip stitch immediately into the stitch right next to that, so that you're starting in the middle of a shell, chain 3, and work 2 double crochet into the same stitch. and that shell will sit on top of the shell from the row before it. Skip to the next shell, find the middle stitch, work 3 double crochet into the top of it. There's 1 and 2 and 3. And that shell sits directly on top of the shell from the previous row. So you're going to get what we call the inline shell stitch happening. All of your shells will be directly on top of each other, and all of your little spaces will be directly on top of each other. Find the next shell, find the middle stitch, work 3 double crochets into it. Oops. And I missed a strand, so I'm going to go back and grab it. There we go. So all of your shells sit on top of the shell from the row before. All of the spaces sit on top of each other. When you finish a row, you join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3, slip stitch into the middle stitch of the same shell, chain 3 to begin the next row, finish it with 2 double crochet. That becomes your first shell, just like this one. And then work a shell into the middle stitch of each shell all the way around. So your stitch count won't change. You'll still have 24 shells or 72 stitches all the way around. And like I said, if you find it easier to keep track of the beginning of that row with a stitch marker, you can continue to mark the top of the chain 3 with your stitch marker. Remember that you will be joining with a slip stitch in the top of it when you finish the row. And we're going to work 12 rows in total of the shell stitch. So this is row 2. We've got 10.5 rows to go of the shell stitch. Remember, each one of those shells is worked into the middle stitch of the shell from the row before, and that way everything will sit on top of each other in line, nice and neat and tidy. Hey, I thought I'd pop in halfway through the bag and do a little update on how these two little colors are coming together. So 2 variegated yarns held together does create, in a sense, its own repeating pattern, because variegated yarns are a set of colors that all sort of show up always in the same order, and they kind of all print out on the yarn the same amount of time every single time. Even if you mix 2 completely different variegated colored ways together, like I've done here, you still get some kind of a pattern showing up. As you can tell, the white and pink always seem to wind up together, so I have these kind of brighter white pink shells that keep showing up. I've got a light green and a dark green that just seem to match up together, and so those shells just kind of keep popping up. And the same thing keeps happening. And even the bottom of the bag has a little bit of a pattern to it. So I love the way this is coming together so far. And it's really sturdy, nice and firm. It's a nice heavy fabric that I'm creating here. So I'm not going to worry too much about the kinds of things that I stuff into this bag when I'm out shopping. All right, back to the crochet. All right, I have finished 12 rows of that inline shell stitch. So you can just count your shells all in a row, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 12. You can join with a slip stitch in the top of that chain 3 that began the row, just like every other row. There we go. And now we're going to do a row of half double crochet to sort of pull everything back together. It's not going to necessarily tighten up the top, but it is going to make it a little firmer. So right where we are, we're just going to chain 1 and half double crochet into the same place that we joined the row. That next stitch always looks a little funny, so don't mess it or miss it. Half double crochet into the next stitch, half double crochet into the next stitch, and all the way around. You're going to work a half double crochet into the top of each double crochet from the row previous. So there'll be 3 half double crochet for every single one of your shells, and you'll be back to just counting stitches. You'll have 72 still at the end of this row. When you get all the way around to the beginning again, so here's that first half double crochet we started with. This is stitch number 72. You'll probably see that little tiny, what looks like a join or a slip stitch, and then the chain one that you started with. It's small, but it should stand out. If not, remember you can always keep marking the first stitch of every row with your stitch marker. You're going to work a second row of half double crochet all the way around the top. And we're going to do what we did on the bottom. So instead of joining the row with a slip stitch, we're going to work the next row's first stitch directly into the first stitch of the previous row. So no joining, just half double crochet directly into that stitch. Nice and tight. And half double crochet into every single stitch around. And remember, you can always mark that first stitch of the row with your little stitch marker. I'll just mark the back half of it there. So I know that when I get back around, that is the first stitch I made in the row. And then we will join the row with a slip stitch, because we just want to basically finish off the top of the bag with two nice tidy rows of half double crochet. There's stitch number 72. That's the first stitch of the row because I haven't marked with a stitch marker. I will now join with a slip stitch to fasten off that second row of half double crochet, and that's the last row at the top of the bag. So I'm going to snip both yarns now. Fasten off by pulling them back through that loop. Pull that nice and tight, and then along the inside edge I'm going to weave those tails in back and forth a few times through those stitches with my yarn needle. Next, we want to make a couple of straps. You want to make two identical, and we're going to be sewing them on to the top of the bag. And one will be sewn on to one side, and the other will be sewn onto the other side. So of course you can make these as short or as long as you want. I have made mine 49 chains in length, and I invite you to sort of try a length that you like by chaining a foundation chain row and then just sort of holding it up over top of the edge of your bag. Now I like my straps to be big enough that I can grab them, put them over top of my arm so that they hang on the middle of my arm, maybe hold them in my hand or put them right up and over my shoulder. So depending on how you want to wear this bag or use it will determine whether you want a short strap or a long strap. You're going to take both strands of yarn still held together, and you're going to leave a tail of about 30 centimeters or 12 inches. So nice long tail, and then you're going to make a slip knot about 12 inches or 30 centimeters up from that length. So don't start using the shorter length. You want to continue to use your regular length of yarn. And chain however many chains you want for the length of your strap. I am using 49 chains. That is a base of 48 plus 1 for turning. I've chained 49 with both my strands held together. That's 48 plus 1 for turning. You can chain as many as you like. For your strap, just be sure to write it down so that you make the second strap exactly the same way. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook, find the second one, and half double crochet into it. We're going to half double crochet into each chain all the way back, so you will have your foundation chain minus 1, or in my case 49 chains in my foundation chain, subtract 1 because that was the turning chain. I will have 48 stitches at the end of row 1. Once you've half double crocheted in every chain all the way back to the end, see there's that nice long tail we started with. You're going to chain 1, turn, and half double crochet into each stitch all the way back. So you're skipping your turning chain, you're working directly into the first half double crochet stitch from the previous row, half double crochet in every stitch all the way back. You'll still have 48 stitches, or the number of stitches you personally have in your strap, and that'll be it for strap number 1, and then you can make strap number 2 exactly the same way. Don't miss that last stitch. Sometimes the last stitch in the row is pulled down the side of your strap a little bit, or the work you're currently working on. So don't miss that last stitch. Count them up just to be sure. You should have 48 in each row, or your custom stitch count. So whatever your foundation chain was, -1. For me, that's 48. You want to leave yourself an equally long tail on this side, 30 centimeters or 12 inches, thereabouts, because we're going to be sewing our straps to the bag with these nice long tails. Fasten off, make sure that's a nice tight knot. Keep your yarn or your wool needle handy because you want to make 2 of these, and then we're going to sew them onto our bags. I've sewn on my first strap already. I wanted you to be able to see it completed before I showed you how to sew one on, and also it'll help you to sort of see how they need to mirror each other. So first you want to flatten your bag. Lay it flat so that it wants to naturally flatten along that bottom line, and then zip up and find the 2 middle shells in your last row. You should have 1, 2 in the middle, and you can go 1, 2, 3. So you're looking at your 6 middle shells. You're going to align the top, or I should say the ends of your straps above those 1st and 6th shell in the middle of your bag. So that's a nice way to sort of even them up. Middle 6 shells, line up the ends of your strap with the 1st and last of those 6 shells. Then lay it so that there's just a little bit of a, both of your straps are kind of facing the same way. So they should both lay flat on the ground, and then there should be just a sort of a little gentle curve at the top. You're going to use the long tails left behind on either end to sew them across the tops of the stitches that are in the last row of the bag. Once you've got the first one on, you're going to flip it over, and it's easy to see where the second one goes. So once again, you take your strap, it's flat, you keep both flat sides down, and then this just creates a little bit of a sort of a twist up at the top. You find the middle 6 shells, or if you're putting on your second strap, you just sort of lay it down so that it's lying opposite the strap on the other side. The end will align with the 1st and 6th shell and the 3 stitches above it. So there's the 6th shell or the 1st shell, and that's an end is going to stick above that, and then all the way over here, same thing. Take both tails, still treating them as one, thread up your yarn needle, and then, a little closer here, you can see that's the 1st shell. I'm going to use the 3 stitches that sit above it. I'm going to take my yarn needle, bring it in underneath the 1st of those 3 stitches along the top of the bag there. Careful not to split the yarn. And then I'm going to sew through the edge of the strap, and I'm going to go through those same 2 places using the whip stitch, so in and out, all the way through the strap, out the other side. I'm going to do that 3 times in each place, making sure it's nice and tight. And you see I'm going right the way through the strap. So 3 times in the same place. Then I'm going to move to the middle of the strap, and I'm going to bisect pretty much the whole edge stitch there, right through the middle of the strap. Then I'm going to be using the middle of those 3 stitches. So I finish with this one, I'm going to move to the next stitch, and I'm going to sew through that spot on the edge, the end I should say, of the strap, and the corresponding stitch below it 3 times. And of course, using a wool needle with a big loop eye, it's easy to thread, but that does mean that your yarn sometimes wants to come out too. So just keep an eye on that. So about 3 times there. Then I'm going to move over to the edge, maybe grab sort of the edge of the strap, and I'm going to use the next stitch along. Again, keeping it nice and tight. I'm going to go through the same place. I'm going to try to do it 3 times. Oh, see, my needle fell off there. And if I've got just enough yarn left, I should be able to do it at least 3 times. Twice is okay too. I think I'm going to be able to do it here. Just have to reload that yarn needle once more. There we go. And back through. So I've sewn through
these 3 stitches and the 3 spots along the edge of the strap. I've done each spot 3 times so that it's on there nice and tight. I now flip it so that I'm looking at the inside of the bag, and those are my little tails left over. I'm going to take my yarn needle, slip it underneath a couple of the tails or just a couple loops, doesn't matter if it's the sewing stitches or some crochet stitch loops. I want to get under a couple of them. I'm going to take one now of those 2 tails, thread up the yarn needle, pull it through so that I've essentially separated them by a couple of loops, and then knot the 2 ends together. So this will stop the strap from wanting to unsew itself. Then I'm just going to weave those 2 tails in back and forth underneath some of those stitches along the edge of the strap, just like I would if I was finished crocheting. And if there's any little bits left over, I'll trim the edge. Once one end is on, nice and tight, make sure that you haven't twisted your strap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's the 6th shell away. Line it up with the 3 stitches above that shell. Thread up the long tail left in your yarn needle and repeat for the 2nd edge.
And there we go. One absolutely gorgeous market bag. To be perfectly honest, I might just end up using this as my summer purse. I love how those colors all worked out together. Those 2 variegated colors together look so pretty. I didn't think it was going to look this nice. I knew it looked good, but not this good. Love my straps. Of course, you know, you can make them longer if you need to, shorter if you just want something to kind of grab. Nice and sturdy, really soft, thick, firm fabric. And because it's 100% cotton, it's fully washable, so you can grab it, take it to the market, stop using plastic bags, or, you know, just have a really snazzy purse that literally everything fits in. I love this. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed making that along with me this week, and we will see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, stay reusable, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Mr. and Stitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.